If you're missing out on breakfast, are you missing out on gains? So rather than make this video entirely about whether or not intermittent fasting influences muscle gain or loss, it's just going to be a general overview of my experience with practicing intermittent fasting, what some of the research says about intermittent fasting and its implications for training, performance, and some other health outcomes, as well as some key takeaways that you may find useful at the end of the video. It's becoming increasingly clear that the timing of one's nutritional intake can have some implications for health outcomes. However, there are still many questions that remain. Common concepts in the space of chrononutrition, which is just the study of our biological rhythms and nutritional intake, are aimed at answering some common questions. For instance, are there better times for humans to be eating? Should there be times at which that should be avoided? Is there an optimal eating window length? How long should an eating window be open for? Not to mention some of the caveats, exceptions, and even contradictions from the recommendations, such as the instance of an athlete who trains multiple times a day, individuals who train in the evening, social and lifestyle factors to be considered also. Okay. So now onto some insights for the 10 people that are actually watching this part of the video. I've missed breakfast at least 1,000 times, considering the fact that I've been practicing some sort of time-restricted feeding regime for the past few years. And I haven't disintegrated into nothing, maybe just shrunk a little. Whether or not there is actually any benefit for the practice of some sort of intermittent fasting regime on certain health outcomes or even sports performance exists is a widely discussed topic throughout the literature. In respect to certain health parameters, intermittent fasting does not seem to have any additional benefit in the context of weight loss and some certain health parameters such as fasting insulin or blood glucose management or high blood pressure. A recent randomized control trial has demonstrated that there are potential benefits for the practice of an early time restricted eating window in respect to things like fasting insulin, high blood pressure, when compared to a longer eating window. The comparison was a 6-hour eating window in comparison to a 12-hour eating window. Now, this is pretty significant. However, I do understand that, for those who may actually go and read the paper, that this was a super small sample size and it was only done amongst male participants. Third, it also doesn't seem to negatively impact the maintenance of lean body mass amongst individuals who are engaged in resistance training. And fourth, it may also stimulate something called the migrating motor complex, which is a cyclical, recurring motility pattern that occurs in the stomach and small bowel during fasting that is actually interrupted by feeding. The MMC is present in the gastrointestinal tract of many species, including humans. The physiological role of the MMC is incompletely understood, but its absence has been associated with gastroparesis and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. I've personally done it because of the fact it just practically fits into my life. I can get up, go to work, train, without having to consider meal prep or eating. I also enjoy larger meals And I also had a recent discussion with one of my coaches, and how the abstinence of consuming, I guess, a breakfast meal led to some sort of increased focus during the practice session, as well as experiencing less burps during handstand practice. Most of my days consist of some sort of physical practice in the morning, sometimes even 2 if we consider jiu-jitsu, and then not eating until 11 to 12 p.m. Like most things, there are trade-offs. I suspect for a muscle-centric goal or approach, fasting is a suboptimal strategy. That said, again, the largest contributor towards muscular hypertrophy is providing an adequate stimulus itself, then macronutrient composition and nutrient timing following that. Outside of the consumption of specific macronutrients, such as carbohydrates, there seems to be a psychosomatic effect that the consumption of any substance may elicit on an individual's appetite or hunger pathways that actually can improve performance. May be a reason why coffee itself may drive performance outside of the actual caffeine content. Now, do any potential benefits exist while training within the fasted state? One study showed an increased level of phosphorylation following a resistance training session fasted. However, this was acutely followed by a carbohydrate and protein rich beverage following this training session. And it's important. And secondly, it's important to note this is only measuring acute effects, which we know don't necessarily translate well to telling us what happens in the long term. And again, with all of this, it can't necessarily be translated into providing long-term nutritional recommendations, as well as pre-workout meal guidance, without considering first the characteristics of the individual's overall dietary intake, training program, and their lifestyle and behavior outside of training, as well as their individual goal. In summary, be wary of the next individual that's telling you that intermittent fasting is the solution to all their problems. It's better to view it as a tool that can be used within the right context. Second, fasting is probably a suboptimal strategy if we're taking a muscle-centric approach for an individual. For purposes of losing weight, it doesn't seem to have any additional benefit than just practicing continuous energy restriction. That said, again, fasting may elicit some changes within one's appetite and hunger pathways, and potentially influence energy expenditure, at least in the short term. If you are going to practice it, I'd recommend starting with a smaller fasting window and gradually building it up. If you plan to train, expect the training session to inherently feel a little harder than normal, or you have to put in more effort to get the same outcome. In my experience, this tends to get better the more you adapt. If you're actually interested in learning more about fasting, I'd recommend checking out Mike Munsel's channel. I hope I said that right. I'll put a link to his channel in the description below. That about does it. See you in the next one.